we gave up too soon. We didn't probe. We didn't do market research. We tried that once, which is the title of my book, and it didn't seem to work, so we just put the whole thing on the shelf. And I look at people and I say, look at your culture. Again, coming back to culture. Are we creating and perpetuating excuses?
Welcome back to the My Future Business Show. I hope you're doing wonderfully well. It's great to be back with you. I love being your host. This is just the best position I could have ever hoped for in my entire life, because I get to speak with some incredibly talented individuals. Now, on today's show, I have the pleasure of welcoming author, business advisor, and speaker, Larry Mietus. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Rick, thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure to have you here. Now, you and I are going to be talking about the number one thing that gets business owners and entrepreneurs into trouble. We're going to be talking about how to distinguish between real opportunities and distractions. And importantly, we're going to take a deep dive into your latest book called We Tried That Once and Other Popular Excuses That Sabotage Business Success. I absolutely love that title. So where are you calling in from today?
Actually, I'm in Buffalo, New York, Western New York, just about 20 minutes from the city downtown, in the metropolis. I call it the metropolis of Depew, but it's a village, and pretty much known for Buffalo, New York, and of course, everywhere we go, people ask us about snow, and yes, we have it.
And, we have all those things.
It happens a couple times a winter, and things close down for 2 or 3 days, and then we're back to normal, so not a problem. I enjoy the change of seasons here.
I bet. Now, do you travel there for work, or is that where you live?
I'm based here, but I do travel for work. Last week, I had the pleasure, my wife and I, we were in Phoenix. I spoke at a conference there for the pet industry. A couple weeks before that, I was in Nebraska, first time. And in about a month, I'll be in Portland, Maine. So usually my speaking engagements take me a little bit farther than my consulting engagements.
Yeah, thank you very much for the feedback. We're going to obviously explore a lot to do with your business and your book and your life, and I'd love to explore a little bit about that. So, what do you do? I can tell you love the sports by the background. Tell us a little bit about the sports that you follow. Do you have a favorite team?
Well, when I was in high school, I played some sports, and then got to college and realized I wasn't good enough to play any of them. But in the course of my life, I've been fortunate, and I've coached a lot of sports at different youth levels primarily. I've coached soccer, basketball. When my sons were in high school, I coached lacrosse. And, it's just a natural segue for me. I do executive coaching for business people and leadership development. So, I'm all about, Rick, just trying to help people maximize who they are, have what I call wild success, and have as much fun as they can pursuing their goals.
We're absolutely going to be doing that momentarily. But as a coach myself for kids' teams, it's a source of great satisfaction. How do you find it?
I love it because we usually look at the kids and say, no offense, but if anybody was that talented, somebody would be knocking on your front door to sign you to a college or to a pro team. And I always look at my job with these youth teams as giving them life skills. When they grow up, when they go into the workforce, they're going to have to know how to communicate. They're going to have to know how to think on their feet. They're going to have to know how to make decisions. They're going to have to get along with strangers. They're going to have to get along with authority figures. And that's the beauty of sports, because it encompasses all of that. But it's really about the camaraderie. Most of these young men that I've coached, I looked at them one day and I said, look, you're going to be standing up at each other's weddings. You're going to be godparents to each other's babies. You're going to be there for the good times and the bad times. You're going to be there the rest of your lives. And that's sometimes they're almost too young to embrace that concept.
Oh, yeah.
But then 5-10 years later, they get together, you get together with them, and it all gels. But just the looks on their faces, the relationships that have been built, that's what's satisfying.
That's absolutely it in a nutshell. Now, in terms of our own childhood, time flies by, doesn't it? But tell us a little bit about growing up. Where was that for you?
Well, I grew up in this city, and I was about I don't know, 6, 7 years old before we actually moved to the suburbs. And my wife had a very rich, fulfilling childhood where 20 people would gather every night on somebody's porch and socialize, and everybody knew everybody.
Yep.
And where I grew up, I think my parents built the third or fourth house on the street, so there was no one around. Um, and I was pretty shy. I mean, believe it or not, I didn't really start to come out of my shell until I was a freshman in high school. I made it through my first year of high school, my freshman year, not owning a pair of blue jeans.
Oh, wow.
So I was kind of an outcast. And then somehow I shifted gears and I was playing sports in high school and did well academically and built some friendships that I'm fortunate enough to say I still have in place today.
Great. Thank you again for the feedback. Now, as we're growing up, I remember, having some people around me that really helped me think about my future and to become the person I've become today. Did you have anybody like that in your life? Inspirational people?
I did. My parents were both born in the early 30s and didn't go to college, so really couldn't advise me there. And we're sort of limited risk takers, which is totally understandable. So
Mm,
obviously I'm grateful to how they raised me and my siblings. I had a high school guidance counselor who looked at me one time and said, you can go anywhere you want and be anything you want. There were almost 700 people in my high school graduating class, and I was ranked number 4. So I had the grades, but even back then I kind of realized, I guess I was a business person back then. And I said, well, it's great that you think I can go to school anywhere, but who's going to pay that tuition? Even on top
yeah.
of grants and
Yep.
scholarships, there's still going to be money. But I had one close friend and his dad was influential, in my life. He was a college educated person and worked at the universities, and he was a good influence, had a great sense of humor. But a lot of people have come into my life. Some of my friends have been friends since high school, since college. And it's just good to have those people to be able to touch base with every now and then and keep us all grounded, keep us all on the same page.
Yeah, I love it. You talked about, entrepreneurs momentarily. Tell me, I remember growing up and my first entrepreneurial experience was washing cars. Can you remember? Can you remember yours?
Well, you know what? I lied about my age to get my first job in a grocery store.
I love it.
I was 15 years old, and I always tell my kids this story and other young adults because the message is you eventually get caught. So about a year went by, and I'm slinging gallons of milk into the cooler one night in the dairy aisle of the grocery store, and the store manager came up to me and said, "Lair, I'm a little bit confused." He said, "You haven't asked for any time off yet, like your friends, to go to the senior prom." And I looked at him and I didn't even stop moving. I just kept stopping. And I said, "Well, why would I go to the prom? I'm only a junior."
Oh.
And he looked at me and he said, "So last year when I hired you, you were a sophomore?" I said, "Yes."
You got me.
And he said, "We never had this conversation.
Love
Keep working." And that was, I realized then, like, okay, it always comes back to haunt you. But I was always intrigued early on by, and I've had a lot of corporate jobs in my lifetime, don't get me wrong, but I always had that seed inside of me that said, I went out on my own to be an entrepreneur, launched my own consulting business because I just wanted to control my time. And Rick, there are days I work 16 hours and there are days I work 16 minutes. But I think the beauty of what I do is on most days I get to choose.
it.
And
Yes.
when my children were younger, I realized that time with them was going to be very limited. Our oldest child, our daughter is 31 years old, and our daughter was born with Down syndrome.
Right.
And when she was young,
Yep.
there was a lot of therapy. There was a lot of speech therapy. There were a lot of things where I needed a super flexible schedule and had to be there and wanted to be there to learn how to do the right things. And I don't regret any of that for a
Absolutely.
second. I mentioned coaching my boys in high school. If I had an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday job, that never would have
It
happened.
wouldn't have happened, would it? No. Yeah, that's great feedback. Love it. This is the part of the call that I really truly love because it gives some great context to you. So I appreciate you sharing. Now, in terms of your daily routine, you're obviously fairly busy. Do you get up early of a morning? You're a morning type of person?
My wife hates me. I get up 7 days a week without an alarm clock. I am wide awake at 5:30.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, you're like me. Do you do anything, leading into I guess that moment where you start working? Do you have like any exercise routines? What's your
Oh
thing?
yeah, I've been going to gyms since I was 18, which was quite a while ago.
Hmm.
I swore I'd never not belong to a gym, and then COVID hit, and I started working out in my basement at home, and
Hadn't stopped.
haven't stopped. Great workouts. Don't have to share the equipment. Get more done in less time.
You know,
Can
this
work out.
this makes me think about discipline because I know myself that it can be a psychological battle of a morning, saying, "Look, I've got to go down there. I've got to do this." How important is discipline for you?
Oh, it's extremely important. I think most successful people, however we're gauging success, happiness, income, career success, I think it comes down to exactly that, to a discipline and to be able to self-discipline yourself. I work from home. I have a home office. My wife always says to me, I could never do that. How do you get anything done? And sure, I get distracted if I'm on the computer too long. I'll step outside. I'll go for a walk. But I've been known every now and then, in between a conference call or two, to throw in a load of laundry, or but it's that flexibility and that variety that really energizes me. And sometimes at 11 o'clock at night, I'll be on my computer, and my wife will say, "Well, you're working," and I'm like, "No, I love what I do. I'm learning.
Yes.
I'm making myself better on behalf of my clients." I've been on my own for 14 years. I've been consulting almost 20 years, and I don't remember really the last time I had a day where I said, "Oh my gosh, I have to work."
You know what? The thing that stuck out for me there is you get to choose. How important is having that ownership? It seems to me that that's what's empowering for you.
Absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way. Now, tomorrow, if I had to go back to the strict structure of corporate America to support my family, would I do it? Absolutely.
Of course.
But hopefully, that won't happen.
So, given that you have this flexibility, what do you do in your relaxation time? Do you enjoy a movie? Do you go out?
You know what? A part of my relaxation is exercise. My wife and I, we're pretty frequent walkers, and when we're in stride, we might be out walking 90 minutes, 2 hours straight.
Yep.
I enjoy home improvement projects. I know when I'm in over my head, and I call an expert. That
You
most of
do.
the time, I can with by the grace of YouTube, I can figure out what to do.
Oh
So yeah,
yes.
I do a lot of home remodeling, kitchen, bathroom, exterior, landscaping. That's kind of my release. But I'm one of those guys. I mean, I like to mow my own lawn. I like to plow my own snow,
Yes.
because I see an instant result, where sometimes as a consultant, it takes a long time to see a result.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I enjoy manual labor.
Yeah, you talked about how you travel a little bit for work, but in terms of private travel and holiday travel, do you have anything on your bucket list?
We went to Hawaii for our honeymoon. I'd still like to get to London.
London? Hmm.
Would like to get to Australia. Would like to get to Greece.
Yes, well, there's certainly ones to put on the hit list. They're nice locations, that's for sure, and certain. But in all of the things that you do, obviously you're an author, you're an advisor, you're a speaker. Out of everything that you do, what do you think is the one thing you do the best?
I really am passionate about speaking. I started speaking. I was in sixth grade. In sixth grade, I attended Catholic grade school. I was 6 feet 1 inches tall, as I am now.
Hmm.
And they looked at me one year and said, "Well, you're the tallest person in the building, so you're going to be the Christmas tree in the Christmas play." And I said, "No,
No, no, no.
I'd rather be the narrator."
Yeah, yeah.
And I spoke in public, and I went home, and I realized, I said to my parents, that didn't bother me at all. I liked it.
You enjoy it.
And ever since then, I've been looking for ways and opportunities to speak. I love my consulting work. I love creating wins and what I call wild success for my clients. I love seeing them become better than they were the day before, the week before, the month they were. I like them to enjoy more profitability with less stress. But I give me an audience for 60 to 90 minutes at a convention, and I get pretty excited.
The world's your oyster.
I always tell people that I'm the guy that puts 50 pounds of clothing or 75 pounds of clothing in a 50-pound suitcase in the weight limit at the airport, because I want them to leave mentally exhausted, and I want to give them 100 pearls. I ask them to focus on one or two, but I never want them to walk out of a session with me and go, "Oh, that was okay. We didn't really learn anything." I want them to sort of feel like they got hit by a tidal wave, and they're struggling to survive a little bit and pick out some of those pearls and activate them. I just love people. I've always had a servant leadership mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I was a waiter and a bartender to work my way through college, and I just get a lot of personal satisfaction serving others, making them better versions of themselves.
Great feedback. Thank you so very much. Now, it's one thing to not have a fear of public speaking, which certainly I think I would, but to be a natural speaker, you obviously would also enjoy telling stories. How important are narratives when you give talks?
They're extremely important. When I teach leadership and leadership development, and I work with C-level people, I tell them all the time, storytelling is a skill they have to master. Everyone can recite facts and figures and look things up online. And sometimes I'll say to HR people or managers, let's say someone violates a policy, and you sit them down and go, "Geez, Rick, page 7, paragraph 4, line 3, chapter 6, it says don't do this, and you did that. And so now we're going to write you up." And I always look at folks and say, "Can you elaborate on that?" And look at Rick and say, "Rick, you violated a policy here. Let me tell you what happened to me when I did that." And all of a sudden, people listen differently. They respect you differently. They follow your leadership differently. I'm big on vulnerability, and it wasn't in vogue. It wasn't fashionable for decades for leaders to show any flaws in their armor. But we're people. We're people dealing with people, and I think the more people realize we're as human as they are, no one's better than anybody else. We have different experiences. We get our best efforts when we collaborate. I think that's what it's all about.
I think as humans, we're also prone to failure, although we don't willingly and knowingly go out to make a mistake in the workplace. Do you think it's beneficial to, sometimes trip over and fail in the workplace?
Oh, absolutely. And the more people know about it, unless it's illegal, unethical, or immoral, that's a whole different category. But I think followers have to see leaders make mistakes. I think followers have to hear leaders say, "I certainly don't know all the answers." And I work with a lot of executives, and I tell them it's instinctive for a person like you, Rick, or myself, or many of your viewers and listeners who have tons of experience, who want to jump right in and say, "Here's what we should do," because we have the experience. But it's difficult, and I coach leaders to say, step back, position a challenge, ask for input, let people percolate on it for a day or two, come back, listen to all of their input, and then at the very end, start to dose in some of your experience and expertise and weave that all together into a viable solution. But I've seen too many people in too many businesses totally shut down because they're asked for their opinion and then they're told what to do.
Yes. It's an amazing dynamic. I given what we've touched on, Larry, you can't help but think you've got a tangential point in time where you either make that decision to lead by shutting up, or you control and dictate to somebody. I'm wondering, given that context, how important is culture within an organization, and how much can you impact it?
Culture beats strategy every day of the week, and in my mind, it always will. And people look at me and go, "But the name of your company is Speaking of Strategy." Exactly. If you give me an A culture and a C-level strategy, we're going to win. You give me an A strategy and a C-level culture, if we're lucky, we might get close. Because anyone can lead, anyone can manage, anyone can coach when you've got outstanding players, outstanding employees, and great market conditions. I always think the mark of good coaches, good managers, good leaders, good business owners is how do you respond? How do you react? What decisions do you make when things aren't good? And we just witnessed that for 4 years when the world went through the pandemic. And I always say that I think the companies that survived the pandemic were well on track before anybody knew what COVID was to always survive. And the companies that failed were already on track years before to not be successful and to potentially fail. Culture is huge. Sometimes people call me up. It makes me laugh. I'm humbled. They call me up and say, Larry, can we have lunch? And we can hammer out this culture thing. And I'm like, this is not a 45-minute exercise. This is 2 to 3 years of repetition and simplicity and duplication and the leaders and the managers constantly repeating the same core values and holding people accountable to those values and hiring to those values and terminating against those values, using those values as a filter system for the company. And we all know it. You can walk into certain businesses in any part of the country, any part of the world, and you feel a certain electricity, you know that's their culture. And sometimes I like it when people tip their head and look at me and go, my wife and I, when we were in Tucson last week, I sought out the general manager of the resort, and I said, I don't know if you know how good your people are, because we haven't been treated this well in years. And he tipped his head and he looked at me and he said, that's what we do. That's who we are.
Yeah.
And if somebody can't do that, they can't be here. They get it. Some companies do, some companies don't. Culture is huge.
Yeah, on balance, Larry, do you see that a lot of companies are getting this right, or a lot of them still behind the 8 ball?
Well, a lot of them I think are still behind the 8 ball, and kind of tying into the theme of my book. I think sometimes they rely on excuses, and sometimes they're legitimate concerns. But lately, I think there are too many excuses. I hear a lot of people saying, well, the culture's not good because, we just have to hire anybody who can breathe because there's nobody out there. And I look at them and I say, don't hire them. Don't hire them. Go through the pain, suck up the difficulty, redistribute the responsibilities, but don't compromise the strength of your culture because you need bodies under your roof. And I know that's easy for me to say, and it's difficult to do. But I can show you companies all over the world who thrive in every economic condition, every fiscal condition, because their people understand, their people are committed, their people have bought in. And most importantly, not only do their people care about their work, their people care about each other.
Yeah.
Here in America, we don't do anything more than we work. We don't sleep more, we don't eat more, we don't vacation more. We spend most of our adult lives at this 4-letter place we call work. So I always say to people, if you're not crazily excited about what you do and how you do it, find something else to do, because you can walk into establishments and just feel it in the air. When the people that are working there don't want to be there, it makes a huge impact.
Yeah, we've been touching on leadership as obviously key to much success in an organization. And it makes me think about, I guess, cross-training, different levels between, operations through to leadership and strategy. Do you think that there's some value in sharing each other's roles so that we all have a better understanding of what we do in an organization?
Oh, absolutely. And then I mentioned, the resort we stayed at last week in Tucson. I was thrilled to see the general manager in a full suit outside on a 105-degree day, picking up litter from the ground, bagging trash, waiting on tables. And it wasn't that they were short-staffed. It was because he saw an opportunity to jump in and set an example. I think cross-training is huge. I can't tell you, Rick, how many companies I go into, and a lot of people work in silos, and they see their job responsibility, and they know if I do my work, that's all I care about, and I'm good. But if they just looked and learned a little bit to the left and to the right about what their peers around them have to do and how those activities are interconnected and where the roadblocks are, that's huge. Now, the one thing I see a lot of, and it's difficult because 80 to 85% of most businesses in the world are family-owned businesses. So the first challenge is sometimes we have people in management and leadership roles who really don't have the skill set to be there, but they have the right DNA, they're family. So they're a manager, they're an owner, they're a leader. But there's a distinct difference in my mind between the skill sets and the competencies and the capabilities between managers and leaders. And it means no disrespect to either one, but I've seen many organizations where people did a good job managing, so they were elevated to leadership, and
Didn't work.
they're not cut out for leadership.
No.
I always like to say I like simplicity because simplicity can be taught, it can be replicated. I mean, McDonald's has made the Big Mac the same way since the 1960s. They haven't changed anything. I could go in tomorrow, you could go in today and make one.
Yep. It'd be all the
right?
same.
But to me, my simple version, my definition is that managers are in place to make sure things get done the right way. But leaders are in place to make sure the right things get done. And those are two separate worlds. Two separate worlds.
Absolutely great feedback. I wonder, we in the opening we talked a little bit about opportunities versus distractions and how to uncover them. But when do we know that we're looking at an opportunity and not a distraction?
Well, I think we have to run it through a filter, and I chuckle because I've been traveling quite a bit lately, and it seems like every C-level person I know, when they get off of a plane, they've got the next great idea. I sat next to Rick, and he told me I have to partner up with him. I sat next to Rick, and he told me we have to pick up his product line, and everybody we meet has a great idea. And quite honestly, myself included, if you're a guy, you see the squirrel run by and you're chasing the squirrel. And I say, you know what, just take a step back, catch your breath, and run what you heard through a filter. And the filter, you ask yourself questions as a business person like, do we have any experience at all in related to this opportunity? Do we have the mental ability, the intellectual property, the horsepower to pursue this quote unquote opportunity? If it's a manufacturing related opportunity, do we have the machinery? Do we have the capital? Do we have the space to store inventory? Do we have the shipping ability? All those things that sometimes people forget to think about. Do we have the human resources to support some of these efforts? Will it be too much of a distraction from our core business and what we already do well? Those are some of the filters that I think if people slowed themselves down, these great opportunities wouldn't look quite as attractive. Now, if the answer to all those questions is yes, maybe, probably, then we start doing a little bit of a deeper dive. We start investigating. Maybe there's something there. But it always amazes me. I don't know about you. Sometimes you'll pick up the Wall Street Journal or a business publication, and there's always a huge article about Company A acquires Company B. And if it doesn't go well, 6 months later, there's an article the size of a postage stamp that says, oh, Company A ended up spitting Company B back out. And I always wonder, I sit there and I go, well, if everybody did their due diligence, what happened? And I think the answer is twofold, and we've talked about both of them already. I think the first one is cultures didn't mesh. Yeah. Cultures collided. And I think the second possibility might be we wanted to buy that. We wanted to say we own that. We wanted to acquire that, but it was never really a fit for our core business.
Yes, absolutely. That's great feedback. I wonder, one of the common things that I took away from going through your information, your book, were excuses. And I think this is the premise for a lot of what's happening in your advisory services. Tell us a little bit about excuses and how damaging they can be.
Well, again, I think I was lazy, guilty as charged. I wanted to write a book for 10 years. I couldn't figure out what to write. And I literally, like a movie, I woke up one night at 3 a.m. and it was there. Excuses. and I picked up a pencil and a piece of paper. I started writing at 3 o'clock in the morning. So the book has 13 chapters. Every chapter is a different excuse that in almost 20 years of consulting, I hear over and over and over again. And when I start deep diving with the business owners and the managers and the company owners and leaders about these excuses, many times they kind of look at me and tip their heads and go, you know what? I don't know the answers to those questions, Larry. We gave up too soon. We didn't probe. We didn't do market research. We tried that once, which is the title of my book, and it didn't seem to work. So we just put the whole thing on the shelf. And I look at people and I say, look at your culture. Again, coming back to culture. Are we creating and perpetuating excuses? So someone runs into Rick's office and says, oh, ran out of time. Oh, ran out of money. Oh, didn't have the right tool. Oh. And maybe that's all true, but maybe it's not. And where we can do a deeper dive, figure root cause analysis, figure out what the problem is, figure out if we can solve it, figure out if it's worth solving, quite honestly, to invest the time, effort, energy, and money to solve it. And then what does that mean to us moving forward? And quite honestly, I think a lot of people talk them out of things. I mean, let's make it personal. How many people do you encounter in a week who go, oh gosh, I'd really like to start working out again? We talked about that earlier.
Yeah.
I say to those people, well, do you watch television? Oh, sure I do. Well, how many programs do you watch every night? Oh, 3 or 4. So you're watching television anywhere from 4 to 8 hours a night. Oh, absolutely. I said, well, how about if you took one of those hours to exercise? Or how about you exercise on a treadmill in front of the TV and you still wouldn't miss any TV?
There you go.
Well, I'd have to buy a treadmill, and I'd have to have a power outlet to plug it in, and I'd have to get gym clothes. It goes on and on and on, and it spins out of control. So, and again, I want to be very clear. Some excuses are extremely legitimate and appropriate, but I think if we discipline ourselves to dig a little bit deeper and solve some of those challenges, we could get much better results as people.
So clearly, top down is from a leadership down, making excuses is devastating for an organization. But could the bad apple in the barrel be anywhere within the organization and affect up and down?
Oh, absolutely. And again, that's why culture plays such a huge part. I say to the leaders and the business owners that I work with, when you ascend that ladder of leadership, you really have to pay less attention to policy, prices, procedures. You have to focus on culture, communication, and people. And if there are people in the organization who are constantly weaving these excuses, now it could be as simple as sitting down and saying, Rick, you told me you couldn't get this done because you didn't have this tool. If you're certain we need the tool, we'll go out and get you the tool. But we need to know that from you because you're the expert, you're the subject matter expert in this part of the business. But those conversations don't even happen in a lot of places. People just become very robotic. They keep doing what they're used to doing. They keep saying what they're used to saying. They keep hearing what they're used to hearing. And they just go, this is the way it's going to be moving forward versus how can we make these incremental changes? But it can exist in any level of the organization. My question always to leadership and ownership is, are you going to tolerate it and why? And quite honestly, I mean, I run ads for my clients that say, this is an environment where we don't tolerate excuses. It doesn't mean things won't go wrong. It doesn't mean there aren't legitimate problems, but we can't be an excuse factory. I mean, again, look at the companies that survived the pandemic. Here in Western New York, we had breweries shut down, beer making companies shut down, and use the exact same equipment with the exact same people to manufacture hand sanitizer.
Yes, that was profound when I heard that. That was incredibly innovative, wasn't it?
Yeah. Now, some people could have said, well, I guess we're going out of business. And some people could have said, let's figure out what else we can do with our equipment and our people.
And they did. I think this comes back to personal responsibility. And I think that would be quite challenging for people. Do you think that from as generations shift in workplaces and we get the, new people coming through, do they have different expectations? Do they maybe come with a sense of entitlement even though they haven't sort of shown their wares in the workplace? And how do different generations yield and work together?
Well, we have certainly around the world, we have multi-generational workforces,
Hmm.
more so than ever before.
Yeah,
At least in the United States right now, the largest percentage of paid workers are either millennials or Gen Zs, but they're still in there with baby boomers and a few other generations. And I don't even think it's with the youngest workers. I don't even think it's a sense of entitlement. They have such an incredible economic pressure on them because of collegiate student loan debt
oh yeah,
that they just can't see their way out of the forest. I mean, the last number I saw in the United States was $1.7 trillion of student loan debt.
that's
So
crazy.
when somebody sits down on day one in an interview with Rick, the CEO, and says, Rick, how long is it going to take me to get your job? Because I need your salary. They're not being arrogant. They're not being insulting. They're trying to figure out their career path and their future because they know they can't survive on $20 an hour.
Yeah,
There's no
absolutely.
way they can. The youngest generation, the Gen Zs, they're looking. It might be the first generation in decades who technically may not be able to afford to buy a house.
Yeah, it's very true, and it's global. It's a global problem.
It's
I,
global.
and
It's global.
it makes me think about, obviously, they're very strategic by default, by necessity. So, what strategies are helpful in the workplace to reduce those excuses and drive that responsibility that we've touched on?
Well, it comes from leadership. Leadership has to walk it and talk it every single day. They can't take a day off. This is who we are. This is how we think. This is how we treat people. This is how we make decisions. Managers and leaders in companies today have to be more accessible than ever before to the youngest talent, the youngest workers in the organization. The Gen Zs and the millennials, it's been statistically proven, backed by organizational psychologists, these folks will leave a higher paying job for a lower paying job where they can learn more faster, have access to competent leadership, not just leadership, it's got to be competent leadership. They're hungry, to learn, and they can do many more things with technology than prior generations could. So we can actually put a lot on their plates. So before you would work in a business 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years before they would start to open up a book and show you the secrets.
Yep.
Not anymore. We have to show the secrets in week one. I've seen a lot of young workers walk away, and then I ask millennials when I'm involved in interviews with them, and obviously you can't ask them their age, but based on when they graduated college and what they talk about, you can
It's
pretty
not hard
much
to work
assume
out.
where they are.
Yeah.
And the number one reason I hear most of these folks say they're looking for a new job, or I'll say, when do you know you've had a bad week at work? And they'll look at me and say, those are the weeks I've learned nothing new. It could be 2 ounces of information, but I need 2 ounces of information. If you want me to get on that treadmill and keep doing the same thing every day and not getting exposed to any new thoughts or any new leadership or not hearing my voice and my opinion, I'm not going to be working here long. And at the end of the day, I think about my dad. My dad was born in 1932. I remember growing up, sitting around the dinner table and listening to what he complained about. It's no different than what people say what they want today in 2024. We all want an opinion to be heard. We all want to be respected in the workplace. We all want to learn. And some of us want to teach others around us, share our knowledge, what we've learned. The difference between my dad in 1932 and today is he would never, ever walk into work and say that. People walk into work every day now and say, hey, this is how I roll. If you can't employ me this way, I can't be here.
You can't be
So
here. Yeah. It's very
human need.
interesting, yeah, because you've got your finger on the pulse. You are actively involved in these situations, let's call them, on almost a daily basis. So it's really powerful insights that you're sharing with the My Future Business audience. So I really do appreciate it. Now, when you do walk into a new business, how do you get a feeling? How do you know where excuses are coming from, and can you measure if they're widespread or they're isolated incidences?
Yeah, and usually when I go into a business for the first couple of days, I walk everywhere. I talk to not many people. I'm just observing body language, faces, gestures, listening to conversations. I'm trying to gauge for, quite honestly, how excited are these people? How happy are these people? How frustrated are these people? Or how rejuvenated are these people? And then I like to deal with everyone in every level of the organization. It's not only talk to C-level people and nobody else. Everyone is a contributor. Everyone has thoughts. Everyone has potential. Sometimes it's hidden potential. And I'll start to just ask open-ended questions like, what frustrates you about your job? One of my favorite questions is, I'll say, Rick, if you own this company by yourself with no partners, and all the pressure, all the burdens of this business were on you, what are some of the things you would change? I've never met anyone who couldn't answer that question. So the thoughts are there, but they're either afraid to say them, or they haven't been invited to say them, or when they did say them, they got put back in their place. So there's humans that work every day, full of energy, full of potential, untapped. But it's in those interviews that I start to hear some of these excuses. And then I start to figure out, where did that come from? Did that come from the person I'm sitting across from? Or were they fed that by some other source in the organization? And then we start to track back out and figure out, where did this mindset come from? And then we have to start adjusting it. And quite honestly, sometimes I go into companies and people get nervous and they think I'm the guy who's going to chop off their heads.
Yeah, look, you've been quoted in one of the biggest magazines globally, HR magazine. So, for anybody who's listening to this call, there's some clout behind this conversation today. So I wonder, because my wife is often working closely with HR departments and making decisions on the fly about, we thought we recruited this person properly. We followed all due diligence. We've met the law. We've got policies. We've done everything that we can to tick the checkbox, as it were. But even though you might do that, the real person comes out once they've started. Now, when that happens, what is an appropriate response? Do you have to try and retrain, or is it okay just to tip that bad apple out of the barrel, do you think?
Well, when that happens, I always say, we point at that person, but it's the old cliche, now there's three fingers pointing back at us. And I always stop and say to the manager, the owner, the leaders, did we set that person up to fail? And sometimes the answer is yes, we did. We either did not train them at all, or they were improperly trained, or we gave them too much responsibility too quickly. It's pretty rare, and I'm a big fan of team interviews. It's pretty rare that 5, 6, 7, 8, a dozen people that interviewed Rick in the interview process were all wrong. But I'm a big fan. We are all born with three great business tools: our heart, our brain, and our gut. And I'm a big fan of tapping back into those, because when somebody doesn't work out early on in an organization, usually if we help that person exit the organization, people put their heads together and go, yeah, I kind of knew from day one he wasn't the right guy. And I look at them and go, why did you hire him?
Yeah.
You knew.
Yeah.
You knew.
Yeah.
Your body was telling you, you ignored it.
Well, it makes me start to think about the metrics, because, it's one thing to onboard somebody who's a superstar and another one not so much. But, incrementally, time is the only, variable that's constantly moving. So how do we start to track and measure our improvements? Is it through lack of turnover? What are some of the key metrics that you use?
I think it's retention. I think it's lack of turnover.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's measuring different levels of customer satisfaction. I'm amazed, Rick, by companies all over the world who never survey their customers, their clients, their patients. And of course, the number one reason they don't do that is they really don't want to know the truth. And if you're surveyed, you're a customer, a client, or a patient, and you spend your time giving feedback, you expect to see things happen because your feedback was reviewed, it was heard, it was discussed. And so we frustrate our customers sometimes by asking them for information, but not acting on the information.
Yes.
And I think, we talked about ego before. I think sometimes ego gets in the ways of companies who say, we've done it so well for so long, we're not going to change anything. And the reality is they need to change something. It's those incremental baby steps, Kaizen, Lean, Six Sigma, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
When we look over our shoulder 5 years later and go, boy, all those little baby steps really took us down the length of a football field.
Yeah.
But, the biggest enemy of success is success. And it's hard to convince people and companies who are successful that they should entertain the thought of changing anything because they push back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I've seen it before. But, we can only really touch the surface of the deeper, I guess, strategic, operational things, recruitment, all the things that we've just briefly touched on. But let's shift gears right now and talk about your experience writing the book. When was it that you decided, you know what, now's the time to write this book?
It was ironically it was right before the pandemic came out, and I think I wrote the book in sort of a non-traditional fashion. I didn't hire a ghostwriter. I didn't hire copy editors. I met with a publisher who was referred to me. I had some professional friends who had published through him, and I wrote a chapter and took it to him and said, "What do you think?" And he said, "Keep writing." He goes, "Otherwise I get up and walk away." He goes, "I like your style." And I purposely wrote the book. I don't know about you, but I look at my library at home and I see dozens of books that are 300, 400 pages long. And I have pretty much never finished any of them.
Yep, got those.
And it seems to be either the first two chapters are great and then it tanks, or the first two chapters are great and the next 8 chapters just repeat what was said in the first 2.
Yeah.
So I really wrote the book to be quick read. Most adults with what I'll call an average reading speed have reported to me that they can read my book in about 90 to 120 minutes.
Beautiful.
And there's 106 action items. There's action items at the end of every chapter, after the end of 13 chapters. And part of my brain said, if I'm a traveler and I'm on a train or I'm on a plane or I'm in an airport terminal in a layover, I could sit down and digest this whole book before I have to get up and get on my next flight. And that was really a big driving key for me. It wasn't losing people in 400 pages of gobbledygook. It was kind of cut to the chase. These are the facts. Here's how you can avoid these excuses. Let's go get them. And that was really the driving force. When the book was drafted and completed, I gave it to my author, and he looked me in the eye and he said, "Are you happy with it? Do you like it?" And I said to him, "I don't like it. I love it." He said, "Good, you're done."
You're done.
He said, "You're done." He said, "If you told me you didn't love it, I'd make you go back." He goes, "But if you think it's there, it's there." And it's funny because every time people see the title of my book or I speak to them about my book, and we tried that once, they burst out laughing and they say, "Welcome to my world. Welcome to my land."
It's funny because I actually think to myself, well, how did you actually come up with that name?
And because it's what people say to me
That's
every
exactly
week.
right. Yeah,
Every
wow.
week. Well, yeah, we tried that once.
Yeah, we tried it once. Not doing it again.
Yeah, so we're not doing it again. And it doesn't matter if it's personal, professional. Yeah, we tried that once. I tried sushi once. I tried bungee jumping once. You name it, they tried it once. And the nice thing is if I'm out speaking and I'm talking about the book, inevitably somebody says, "Hey, can I have your card? I might need your consulting services." If someone doesn't want to bring me on as a consultant, I look at them and I say very respectfully, "Do yourself a favor, spend $25, buy the book.
Buy the book.
There's 106 pearls in there. One of them is going to resonate with you. Take that one and run with it. If you need help, call me."
And knowledge compounds. Obviously, you're gathering it as you're going around. You're doing your speaking gigs and you're advising to different organizations. Surely there has to be another book in the works.
Well, I thought about it. I don't think, if I can say it this way, that I haven't gotten enough mileage out of my first book.
Mm-hmm.
If I do write a second book, it's just going to be a continuation of the next grouping of excuses that we hear out there in the world. I'm actually in the legal process of trademarking a slogan, and I call myself the Chief Excuse Obliterator CEO.
Yeah.
So I'm going to own that phrase, but I think every organization needs a person who's in charge of investigating these excuses. And if they're not legitimate, sweep them out. If they are legitimate, do the deep dive and do the fix. But
Yes.
we have to get away from the culture of excuses.
It's an interesting thing, you know. It makes me wonder. Oh, you should be able to trademark leadership, Larry. I absolutely love that. And
Thank you.
where did that come from?
You know what? I was wrapping up my master's degree in organizational leadership, and I was near the end of the program. And we were at the dinner table one night, and my youngest son was sitting next to me, and I was talking about my capstone project, and what I was going to do for the project, and what I was going to do with my life after I obtained this master's degree.
Of course.
And my son sat next to me and looked at me, and he goes, "Well, Dad," he said, "you'll figure it out. You're leadership Larry." And I was like, "What did you just say?"
That's crazy. Oh, I love
And
it.
it was born right there at our kitchen table. My son John came up
and
with
it's
that.
stuck like glue. Now, tell us, do you have any speaking engagements coming up?
I just wrapped up a bunch. I've got one coming up next month. I'll be in Portland, Maine for. I do a lot of speaking engagements for a group called the Healthcare Leadership Association. They have different chapters around the country, but healthcare obviously is going through dynamic change, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, a lot of financial pressure, a lot of people leaving the industry, difficulty recruiting into the industry. And that whole level of leadership is sort of saying, okay, we know where we've been, but where do we have to go and how do we get there? So
yes. Okay. So,
yeah.
And who is actually your ideal client? Do you have a selection?
When it comes to consulting, I find that my best work and my best clients tend to be companies with anywhere from, I'm going to say, 30 to 300 employees. If they're smaller than that, they really can't bring in outside help, or they try to solve it all themselves. If they're bigger than that, then they might say, well, we've got an extensive HR team and we have resources all over the world, and we don't think we need a guy like you. That middle spot where they're sort of on the fence going, we sort of have it, we sort of need help.
That's it.
We want to do it ourselves. We don't want to do it ourselves. That's kind of my best lane. When it comes to speaking, oh my gosh, Rick, I've spoken in rooms that had one person in them, and I've spoken in front of audiences that had thousands of people in them.
Yes, so anything in between. Yep.
And my promise is you still get 127% from me. I don't peel back. I always go over the time limit. I warn folks, if lunch is after this, you're going to be late for lunch.
And I tell you what, though, you're obviously an educator. You're obviously a giver. You've got great stories, and the sum of all those parts makes me think about other ways that you could possibly be educating. Now, tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Yeah, I tried to make my podcast a little bit different when I do them. I try to make them 3 minutes or less, so they're super short and sweet like my book. And I try to put sort of inspirational leadership nuggets out there. I typically don't interview anyone, and you've been extremely gracious interviewing me, and I'm thankful for that.
That's a pleasure.
But it's just kind of like, okay, if you're driving, if you're on the way to a meeting, if you're on that treadmill, what can I say to somebody in 3 minutes that gets them to go,
that's relevant.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And again, it runs the gamut from decision making to leadership to hiring, recruiting, motivation. And quite honestly, I'm guilty as charged. I don't create those as often as I should. I lack a little bit of discipline there. But it's part of my arsenal, and I enjoy doing it.
Yeah, look, you've been a great guest, and I'm wondering when people want to reach out with you, there's obviously a couple of things they need to do is to know where to go to find you, which I'm hoping you can share briefly. But also, when they do find you, tell us a little bit about your onboarding process.
Yeah, my pledge, if I'm speaking, consulting, teaching, I tell people, as long as you can find me and I'm alive, I will get back to you. I promise. And sometimes it's 5 years go by and somebody goes, hey, I saw you speak 5 years ago in Las Vegas. Can I ask you this? Absolutely. Email is always the best. My email address is leadershiplarry gmail.com.
Easy.
If you look me up on LinkedIn, Larry Mietus, you'll find me on LinkedIn. I do a lot there. I try to post 3 or 4 times a week and engage with people there. If people are looking for my book and they go to Amazon or they go to Barnes and Noble, all they have to do is type in "We Tried That Once" or type in my name.
Yep.
You'll find it.
Going to be there. There you go.
It's
Well,
gonna
look,
be
if you're on this call today, we've had a fantastic call, and again, we've only scratched the surface, as it were, of all the potential topics that we could have covered today. So I highly recommend that you get your hand on Larry's books, and if you're looking for those links, I'm going to make sure that you have easy access to them below this post. All you need to do is click the buttons and you'll be able to get the book and connect with Larry. And all that being said, Larry, great call. Thank you very much for joining me on the show today.
my pleasure, Rick. Thank you so much. Best wishes to wild success for you.